Thank you for listening to the Council of Institutional Investors' Voice of Corporate Governance. The number one best corporate governance podcast is determined by Million Podcasts. I'm your host, Jeff Mahoney, General Counsel of CII. The purpose of these monthly episodes is to update CII members and the general public on significant developments in corporate governance and capital markets regulation and CII's related advocacy activities. This update covers the period from October 1st to October 28th, 2025. The following is my top 10 list of events over that period. Number 10, on October 7th, the United States Senate confirmed by a vote of 51 to 47 the nomination of Paul Atkins to be a U.S. Securities and Exchange Commissioner for a term expiring on June 5th, 2031. Atkins served as SEC chair since April when the Senate voted to confirm him until June 2026, filling the remainder of Chair Gary Gensler's term. Number 9, on October 14th, the City of Hollywood Police Officers Retirement System filed a proposed class action in U.S. District Court in New Jersey on behalf of ExxonMobil shareholders against the company and its board, alleging that they are breaching their fiduciary duties in connection with the company's adoption of its retail voting program. The suit also seeks an injunction against ExxonMobil to prevent it from implementing the program. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on September 15th granted a request from the company for no action relief for the novel program under which the company's retail shareholders could authorize ExxonMobil to vote their shares following its board's recommendations. Shareholders would be required to opt into the program and would continue to receive proxy materials as they currently do. The authorization would continue indefinitely for all future shareholder votes unless the shareholder opts out of the program. Under the program, retail shareholders could authorize the company to vote their shares following the board recommendations, either for all matters considered at annual meetings or for all matters except contested director elections and mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures that require shareholder approval. The program does not include a default option to oppose board recommendations on one or more proposals. The company will remind retail shareholders of their authorization each year, and they will have the opportunity to cancel participation in the program. In addition, shareholders could override the board's recommendation on one or more voting items by submitting their own proxy card. The complaint alleges that by attempting to weaponize a largely disengaged body of retail shareholders, the retail voting program affirmatively violates federal law and constitutes both an unlawful entrenchment device and a breach of fiduciary duty under New Jersey law. The suit also argues that the program impairs the voting rights of shareholders that opt into the program based on inadequate disclosures and will dilute the votes of those shareholders that cannot or don't want to opt into the program. The suit also argues that the company's communications to its shareholders announcing creation of the retail voting program and seeking enrollment in the retail voting program constitute solicitations, and ExxonMobil has not met the requirements in the SEC's proxy solicitation rules. More broadly, the suit says the program is just one component of a longer campaign by ExxonMobil to oppose shareholder initiatives that advocate change to corporate policies and practices adopted by the board. The complaint cites the contentious 2021 proxy contest in which engine number 1 ultimately won 3 board seats, and the 2024 lawsuit that ExxonMobil filed to keep an emission reduction target proposal filed by Arjuna Capital and Follow This off the company's proxy ballot. In other legal news related to ExxonMobil, on October 24th, ExxonMobil filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Eastern District for California against the state of California over a pair of 2023 climate disclosure laws that the company says infringe upon its free speech rights, namely by forcing it to embrace the message that large companies are uniquely to blame for climate change. ExxonMobil's complaint asked the court to prevent the laws from going into effect next year. In its complaint, ExxonMobil says it has for years publicly disclosed its greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related business risks, but it fundamentally disagrees with the state's new reporting requirements. The complaint states that the company would have to use frameworks that place disproportionate blame on large companies like ExxonMobil for the purpose of shaming such companies. Under California Senate Bill 253, large businesses will have to disclose a wide range of planet-warming emissions, including both direct and indirect emissions, such as the costs of employee business travel and product transport. The complaint states that ExxonMobil takes issue with the methodology required by the state, which would focus on a company's emissions worldwide and therefore fault businesses just for being large as opposed to being efficient. The second California law, Senate Bill 261, requires companies making more than $500 million annually to disclose the financial risks that climate change poses to their businesses and how they plan to address them. ExxonMobil said in its complaint that the law would require it to speculate about unknowable future developments and post such speculations on its website. A spokesperson for the Office of California Governor Gavin Newsom said in an email that it was truly shocking that one of the biggest polluters on the planet would be opposed to transparency. Number 8. On October 23rd, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island was joined by Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina in introducing S. 3055, the Corporate Governance Fairness Act. Senator Reed stated that the purpose of the bill is to ensure that investors can continue to rely with confidence on the advice of proxy advisory firms by requiring the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to regulate all major proxy advisor firms under the Investment Advisors Act. Senator Reed noted that proxy advisor advice is critical for investors as they decide how to vote their shares on important corporate governance matters such as director elections or whether to sell the company. Senator Reed referenced the Council of Institutional Investors for the view that proxy advisory firms make pension fund proxy voting more efficient and cost-effective for the benefit of fund beneficiaries. Senator Reed explained that under the provisions of the proposed legislation, all major proxy advisor firms would be required to register as investment advisors under the Advisor Act. They will owe a fiduciary duty to their clients, and that duty will be enforceable under federal law. So as not to discourage new entrants into the proxy advisor business, the bill provides smaller proxy advisor firms the choice to voluntarily register. Proposed legislation also directs the SEC to conduct periodic examinations, which must include a serious review of the conflicts of interest policies of registered proxy advisor firms and whether firms knowingly made false statements to any of its clients. Lastly, the bill requires the SEC to consult with all relevant stakeholders and report back periodically to the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee with recommendations for any additional investor protections beyond continued access to proxy advisor firms so that investors have the tools to make informed investment decisions and exercise their rights as shareholders. Of note, in 2018, at the request of Senator Reed's staff, CII staff was actively involved in the drafting of a bill that was a predecessor to S. 3055. Number 7. On October 2nd, the staff of the Council of Institutional Investors released research indicating that 39 directors at 31 companies failed to win majority support from January through August, and 37 of these directors continue to serve in the boardrooms of those companies. This marks an increase from 35 directors at 27 companies during the same period in 2024. CII monitors the prevalence of these zombie directors at U.S.-based Russell 3000 companies and engages with boards on their continued service as part of its board accountability list. Although there were 2 cases where majority-opposed directors actually departed their boards, just one of those instances involved the board exercising its discretion. George Mays Jr. resigned from the board of Forward Air in June after receiving just under 44% support at the company's annual meeting in June. His resignation was accepted by the board. Dr. Leonard Toe passed away in August, 2 months after receiving below 28% support at AMC Network's annual meeting. The following 6 directors tendered resignations after failing to win majority support. However, their company boards rejected those resignations. Those 6 directors included number 1, Claudia Drayton at 3D Systems, number 2, Jay Hoag at Netflix, 3, James Donarow at Next Point Residential Trust. 4, Richard Piretz at the Chef's Warehouse. Number 5, Carrie Lee at Utah Medical Products. And number 6, Thurman John T.J. Rogers at Enphase Energy. Some zombie directors continue to serve year after year despite failing to win majority support. This year, CII identified the following 5 directors at 4 companies who failed for multiple consecutive years. Number 1, Eric Singer, 2 years at A10 Networks. Number 2, Dr. Leonard Toe, 3 years at AMC Networks. Number 3, Ernest Ferguson, 3 years, and John Loden, 2 years at Ingles Markets. And number 5, Megan Choice, 2 years at the Boston Beer Company. Number 6, on October 9th, the staff of the Council of Institutional Investors released research that revealed that between January and August 2025, a total of 51 shareholder proposals received majority support. And of those 51 proposals, 46 focused on core corporate governance matters. Specifically, 45% of the majority-supported proposals asked companies to adopt simple majority voting policies. Of that total, the majority received shareholder support exceeding 80%. 17 of these proposals were filed by John Chevedden, while 3 were filed by the Accountability Board, 1 by Matt Prescott, and 2 did not have their proponents disclosed. The remaining 23 governance proposals addressed board declassification, reduced special meeting thresholds, adoption of written consent, and ratification of board actions. All 5 of the non-governance proposals receiving majority support asked companies to disclose political contributions. 12 proposals have been implemented, including 5 that management recommended voting for in the proxy statement. Most of the majority-supported shareholder proposals were not management-supported and were not disclosed as having been implemented. The overall volume of proposals receiving majority support increased slightly from 48 overall during the same period in 2024. CII monitors the implementation of majority-supported shareholder proposals at U.S.-based Russell 3000 companies as part of its board accountability list. In letters to the boards of those 39 companies, CII will ask how they plan to respond to each proposal. Number 5. On October 23rd, the staff of the Council of Institutional Investors released research indicating that the most recent director election at chemical firm Tronox Holdings exemplified the spirit of majority voting at its 2025 annual meeting. The company nominated Fawaz Al-Fawaz to join its board, but he did not become a director after falling short of 50% shareholder support. Through its board accountability project, CII confirmed that the Tronox scenario is an exception to the widespread corporate practice in the United States in which majority-opposed board candidates wind up serving on behalf of shareholders who don't support them. CII wrote to 22 Russell 3000 company boards with directors who failed to receive majority vote and still listed those directors in U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission filings. In its outreach, CII inquired about the continued service of these zombie directors and strongly recommended that majority-opposed directors continue to serve only for a reasonable transition period until the replacements are identified and appointed. As indicated, CII also wrote the 39 Russell 3000 company boards with shareholder proposals that won majority support, focusing on those with boards that have not publicly committed to incorporating the requests in those proposals. After the outreach, some companies promptly informed CII that their boards are determining next steps for the implementation of the proposals. Some companies, like Celanese Corporation, which promptly amended its charter to eliminate supermajority voting thresholds, serve as role models. Those companies adopt the changes sought by majority-supported shareholder proposals and state their plans alongside voting results in 8K filings. But such rapid implementation is not a common occurrence. Instead, most companies acknowledge the outcome of the proposal in voting results, but do not publicly disclose any board deliberations on the vote outcome. This outreach campaign follows up on proposals that are considered not implemented per CII's board accountability list. Number 4, in October 10th letter to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the Council of Institutional Investors supported a NASDAQ proposal to bolster market integrity by imposing a minimum offering size for newly listed Chinese companies. The letter also underscored the alignment of the proposal with CII's recent research correspondence on risk associated with Chinese companies. Under the proposed rule change, any new public offering by a Chinese company must meet a $25 million threshold to proceed. CII's letter was sent in response to a public comment period related to the proposed change. The Nasdaq's proposal comes after incidences of alleged market manipulation and irregular trading patterns, further aided by low liquidity and high volatility that disproportionately involved the smallest microcap Chinese companies. CII commended the timeliness of the proposal, noting that even Chinese authorities took steps earlier this year to limit the overseas listings of microcap companies in response to these concerns. CII letter noted that Nasdaq's concerns potentially could be compounded by the following four additional risk factors, many of which have been addressed in CII's research correspondence. 1. Shareholders have limited rights under direct listings and de-SPAC mergers and the poor governance practices often employed by such companies. 2. Many Chinese companies list in the United States through a variable interest entity and are based in the Cayman Islands, whose corporate laws provide weak protections for shareholder rights and can complicate potential enforcement actions. 3. Many investors may not fully understand a company's true ties to China or how ownership or jurisdiction may not accurately represent business operations. And 4. Relaxed disclosure requirements for foreign private issuers do not account for the large number of Chinese foreign private issuers on U.S. exchanges today, creating a comparative disadvantage for domestic companies and reducing investor protections. CII praised Nasdaq's inclusion of the following three important safeguards in its proposed rule change. 1, the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau are included in the People's Republic of China when determining if a company is Chinese. 2, the proposed requirements extend beyond traditional initial public offerings to include direct listings, de-SPAC mergers, and uplistings of companies already traded over the counter or on other exchanges. And 3, several different indicators, such as the source of its company revenues, the nationality or residence of its directors and officers, where its employees are located, and the persons or entities that control the company, are used in the proposed requirements to determine whether a company is Chinese. Number 3. In October 22nd letter to the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, Counsel of Institutional Investors urges the Commission to pursue rulemaking in at least 3 areas. 1, to consider improving the transparency of the voting results of multi-class companies. 2, consider requiring better disclosure of non-GAAP executive compensation targets, company proxy statements. And 3, consider adding back to its rulemaking agenda a project on proxy process amendments that could encompass end-to-end vote confirmation if necessary. More specifically, the CII letter commends SEC Chair Paul Atkins for including on his first rulemaking agenda as chair of the SEC a project to rationalize disclosure practices to facilitate material disclosure by companies and shareholders access to that information. CII believes that project should include proposing improvements disclosures in at least 2 areas. 1, first, by proposing class-by-class disclosure of voting results in the project. CII believes company shareholders and potentially board members who represent them would have the means to affirmatively determine whether the board's response to a proposal's outcome is consistent with the preferences of the broad shareholder base representing the majority of outstanding equity. Second, CII believes a project should also propose requiring disclosure of a quantitative reconciliation of GAAP to non-GAAP financial measures used to determine executive compensation and a qualitative description of why the non-GAAP financial measures are better for determining executive pay than GAAP financial measures. CII letter cites a 2023 research article co-authored by the SEC's former chief economist and director of the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis, providing empirical evidence indicating that companies are engaging in an opportunistic use of opaque non-GAAP earnings to justify higher executive compensation. CII letter asserts that we continue to believe it's imperative that the SEC promptly propose a rule that, at a minimum, closes the loophole on the lack of quantitative reconciliation disclosure between GAAP and non-GAAP financial measures for executive compensation targets. The CII letter highlights the working group that CII co-chairs with the Society of Corporate Governance to ensure that the various intermediaries in the voting chain, including banks, broker-dealers, public companies, transfer agents, and tabulators, work together to ensure that beneficial shareholders can confirm that their votes, including votes in contested director elections, are counted correctly. CII letter recommends that concurrently with CII's joint efforts with the Society for Corporate Governance, the Commission should consider adding a project to its agenda to monitor the progress being made in end-to-end vote confirmation, and only if it becomes necessary to consider rule proposals to facilitate end-to-end vote confirmation for end users consistent with CII's membership-approved policy. Number 2, on October 14th, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission acted within its statutory authority when it capped the fees the national security exchanges could charge investors for accessing their services. Several exchanges had petitioned the court to review the caps, arguing that the SEC exceeded its authority and acted arbitrarily or capriciously. Counsel of Institutional Investors filed an amicus brief on March 25th with the Healthy Market Association and the American Securities Association supporting the SEC in the exchange's legal challenge to the Commission's amendments to Regulation NMS, which caps fees and increases the transparency of exchange fees and rebates. CII's General Counsel said, as indicated in our joint amicus brief, we believe the D.C. Circuit's decision rightly endorses the SEC's authority to set rules for equity markets consistent with CII's membership-approved principles for trading practices. The General Counsel added that we look forward to the prompt implementation of the Commission's improvements to trading practices in the equity markets. CII sent a letter to the SEC back on March 30th, 2023, strongly agreeing with the Commission's conclusion, which is affirmed by the recent decision, that the reduction of stock exchange access fee caps will benefit CII members, other institutional investors, and improve the quality of trade execution. And my number 1 most significant development in U.S. corporate governance and capital markets regulation for the period from October 1st to October 28th, 2025, occurred on October 9th, when U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Paul Atkins delivered a keynote address at the John L. Weinberg Center for Corporate Governance 25th Anniversary Gala. The speech was viewed by many representatives of public corporations, institutional investors, and corporate and securities law experts as surprising, particularly when Chair Atkins suggested the SEC may be open to eliminating the ability of shareholders to submit precatory shareholder proposals to companies incorporated in Delaware. The SEC chair explained that while SEC Rule 14A-8 provides a mechanism for a shareholder to have a proposal included in a company's proxy statement, the rule can only be used for proposals that can be brought properly before a shareholder meeting under state law. Chair Atkins added that if a proposal is not permissible under state law by not being a proper subject for action by shareholders, Rule 14A-8 permits a company to exclude the proposal from its proxy statement. Chair Atkins referenced a forthcoming law review article by Kyle Pinder of the Delaware law firm Morris, Nichols, Arsh, and Tunnell. In that article, Pinder argues that under Delaware law, shareholders do not have a fundamental right to bring non-binding shareholder proposals, such as those requesting that companies prepare reports on environmental or social topics or change governance practices. Chair Atkins posited that if there is no fundamental right under Delaware law for a company's shareholders to vote on precatory proposals, and the company has not created that right through its governing documents, then a precatory shareholder proposal submitted to a Delaware company is excludable under paragraph I-1 of Rule 14A-8. which allows a company to exclude a shareholder proposal from its proxy statement if the proposal is not a proper subject for action by shareholders under the laws of the jurisdiction of the company's organization. Chair Atkins indicated that to use this provision, a company's no action request must include a legal opinion that the proposal is not proper under state law. A noteworthy section of Rule 14A-8I1 also states, quote, in our experience, most proposals that are cast as recommendations or requests that the board of directors take specified action are proper under state law. Accordingly, we will assume that a proposal drafted as a recommendation or suggestion is proper unless the company demonstrates otherwise, unquote. If a company makes the argument with its legal counsel backing it up that the proposal is not a proper subject under Delaware law, and the firm seeks the SEC staff's views, Chair Atkins indicated that he has high confidence that the SEC staff will concur. If the proponent of a proposal challenges the contention that it is not a proper subject, the case could end up in the Delaware Supreme Court. Chair Atkins' remarks appear to be aimed at ESG proposals, which he said politicize shareholder meetings, frequently involve issues not material to a company's business, consume a significant amount of management's time, and impose costs on a company. Many law firm memos analyzing the SEC chair's remarks warn that what Chair Atkins proposed could go beyond just ESG proposals and eliminate all precatory shareholder proposals. For example, an October 10th memorandum from Morrison Forrester warns that Chair Atkins' statement, quote, potentially opens the door for excluding nearly all shareholder proposals submitted to a company if the company obtains a legal opinion that concludes local law does not provide an express right to bring shareholder proposals, unquote. Law firm memo added that, quote, no action relief granted under this basis would represent not only a dramatic shift in the shareholder proposal playing field, but also could upend the process entirely, unquote. In addition, an October 13th memo from Freshfields explains that if shareholders' ability to file precatory proposals is severely restricted, they will seek other avenues to send messages to companies. Law firm points to the use by the AFL-CIO and the United Mine Workers of America of universal proxy card rules to run a, quote, headless, unquote, proxy contest for 5 governance proposals in 2024. Law firm memo says that while the proposals were run as precatory, advisory, and non-binding, it would not take much effort to run a binding vote proxy contest using the same tools. Law firm memo adds that while we did not see a repeat of this tactic in the 2025 proxy season, the SEC's policy shift may push more proponents down this path in 2026 and the years that follow. Sanford Lewis, Director and General Counsel of the Shareholder Rights Group, points out that under federal law, major changes to the shareholder proposal rule require public notice and an opportunity for shareholders to comment before those changes can be implemented. Lewis questions if what Chair Atkins is proposing is an end run around these requirements. Lewis also notes that Delaware corporations and their investors benefit enormously from focused engagement through such proposals on governance as well as relevant policy issues. Lewis warns that if the Delaware Supreme Court issues a broad ruling that advisory proposals are not a proper topic for meetings, it would be a catastrophic blow to shareholder rights. In addition to using Delaware law to rule out shareholder proposals, Chair Atkins proposed that both states and companies could set their own threshold requirements for submission of shareholder proposals. Chair Atkins cited the new Texas law that permits companies to require a shareholder to own at least $1 million in market value or 3% of the company's voting shares, among other requirements, to submit a shareholder proposal. Chair Atkins also referenced comments by SEC Commissioner Mark Ueda, in which he said Rule 14A-8's procedural basis for exclusion should be viewed as default standards that apply only if companies decline to establish their own standards in their governing documents. Chair Atkins said he agreed and added that he sees no difference if the standards are contained within a state's corporate law. Finally, Chair Atkins announced that the SEC would be conducting an evaluation of Rule 14A-8's fundamental premise that shareholders should be able to force companies to solicit for their proposals to the extent that a shareholder proposal is a proper subject for shareholder action under state law at little or no expense to the shareholder. Chair Atkins noted that the SEC would propose changes and gather public feedback before adopting any changes to Rule 14A-8. That completes my monthly update on significant developments in corporate governance, capital markets regulation. If you have any questions regarding any of the issues discussed, please feel free to email me at Jeff, that's Jeff, at CII.org. Till next time, I'm Jeff Mahoney. Thanks again for listening to the Voice of Corporate Governance.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Voice of Corporate Governance, brought to you by the Council of Institutional Investors. The Voice of Corporate Governance is a free, non-sponsored podcast that highlights critical developments in corporate governance and other important issues affecting institutional investors. The views expressed by those interviewed on the podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of CII or its members. For more information on CII and its policies on corporate governance, please visit our website at www.cii.org.